Good morning, everybody. This is One Pretty Ricky. We're super happy that we are officially live on the radio, KRFF 95.9 LPFM. We are live on Facebook. Shout out everybody tuning in on Facebook. And joined with my amazing co-hosts who are joining virtually, Kirsten Huovinen and Adam Martin. What's up, y'all? How you feeling?
So I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. I'm currently in Minot. And so we're coming remote. Both Kirsten and I are remote. She's in Florida and I'm in Minot. And so I'm here doing some work related stuff, and then I think Kirsten's out in Florida doing some personal stuff. So
yeah, we wait to go to Florida till it's really hot. And we just were like, oh, the tickets are cheap. I don't know why.
And then you get there and it's like, oh, that's why.
Yeah, it's like going to North Dakota in January.
Which we do for a lot of speakers for some reason. It's like we decided that we're going to have our biggest conference in January, or like for Opportunity Ball, we have it in February. So,
yeah, maybe we just want to show how tough we are. Like, if you could live through this.
Yeah, if you can make it, if you can make it, you can survive. If there's ever an apocalypse,
yeah,
I would put my money on people willingly coming to North Dakota and gun sales going through the roof, which would be typical for North Dakota. So
yeah, it would.
What are you up to, Ricky?
It's been quite the week. It's been a good, been relatively good, but not the best week. So I was kind of sharing before we got on the show. So recently took Ricky in for his 4-month shots. He's turning 5 months next week, but it was delayed. Anyways, so we took him in to get his shots, but then when they were doing the weighs and measuring his head and all that, apparently he lost weight, lost 1.5 pounds since the last time he ran. And so then, of course, doctors are like, all right, you need to increase his calorie intake, and you need to, incorporate formula on top of the breast milk or whatever, which has been the worst because Ricky has never had formula. Thankfully, Jelsa just produces more than enough. And so we've been able to just have that. And so we had to put the formula in it. So we've tried 3 different formulas. All of them makes him spit up. The last one that we tried, this sensitive Enfamil, just made him curl up in a ball and just cry, and he got no sleep, and it was just nothing you can do because once has it, it's all right, well, kind of gotta wait for this to pass, man. So that was dumb. So now it's just been we got to go and get him weighed again today because the doctor's all right, want to check to see after 5 days how he's doing. So we got to take him into this afternoon and basically get the same thing. All right, he hasn't gained any weight. He probably lost even more weight just because he keeps spitting up all of his food. So it's just one of the joys of trying to navigate, as you both know, with having your own kids. And it's just all right, how do we get through this? He's not old enough quite for solids yet. So it's just okay, how do we bide the time? But he's been doing great. He's been sleeping, finally sleeping through the night, the whole night. Just still happy, loves people. So he does all the things that you hope for, but just, I don't know, have maybe too high of fast. It's definitely got his metabolism from Jelsa because he did not get it from me. I can't seem to, keep anything off. So.
You don't have that Ricky booty?
No, not yet. He has it. He has it where it counts. I think I could say that on the
And every day. But just so people know, your son is named Ricky also.
Yes.
You're not talking about yourself in the third person. Which makes this whole thing really weird.
Yeah, Ricky the Fourth. Yeah, carrying on the legacy. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, my daughter is 3, and she's fun. she does this thing or whatever where her when I see her with Chris, whatever, Christy will say, she's like, my heart misses you. And then baby will respond and say, "My heart misses you too." And then I'm like, "Oh, baby, my heart misses you too." And she's like, "You have no heart."
Oh no.
And I'm just like, "What?" I was like, "Did you teach her that?"
Oh, that's great.
Chrissy just teaching.
Yeah,
all
they
the
turn
bad
out
things.
okay. They say terrible twos, but those threes are rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then so is 13. And then so is 35.
So it's the threes. Every time
Yeah,
they hit a
must be.
three, like
Definitely
a
must
3,
be.
a
Yep.
13, 23, 35. Yeah.
It is stressful though. Like parenting is super stressful, especially in recovery, because you just don't know what to do with all that frustration and oh god.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to be with them all the time. I always say like, okay, I need an afternoon off, so I'm gonna have somebody watch him or take him to daycare or whatever. And then the second I do that, I feel guilty about that. And then it's just like I'm gonna lose my mind though if I'm with him any longer. Anyway, but then they grow up and it's easier. And then they don't want to be around you. They're like, "Can I just go to the basement?" Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Just go in the basement, tired of trying to entertain you and not talk to you.
It's like, please.
We had this rule this was I heard this from a speaker, an AA speaker once, but to have time every evening with your kids. So since did you just fall out of your chair?
Yeah.
Since they were, I don't know, the last 5 years or so, from 5 to 7 every night, they got to hang out with me and Matt if he's there. And they got to either help me cook, play a game with me, interact somehow. There's no electronics. It's like screen-free time. And it murders them every day. It's like every day, it's a new day and a new punishment. And some days they're really into it, but they're usually like, "Can we please be done early?" What? Why? But anyway,
fun.
in spite of themselves, they end up talking a lot. I don't know. Car rides are best for boys to talk because they don't have to look at you. They can look forward and tell you stuff that they don't have to see your reaction for.
Right. I think that's just a guy thing, the whole in the vehicle thing, or whatever. Because some of the best conversations I've had I did my fourth and fifth step with my sponsor while we were driving.
Yeah.
Like it's just there's less. It's weird thinking that there's all that distractions like all around you as you're driving down the freeway or down the road or whatever. But it's actually less distractions. It's a lot harder to be on your phone for long periods of time when you're driving, or it's, you don't answer your phone. You give the benefit of not answering your phone because you're doing a fourth and fifth step. Like it's better for guys in my experience.
Yeah. If your hands are busy, it seems like your mind is clear for some reason.
Yeah. Cause we're workers, we're solution orientated. So if we got to keep something busy. Keep the eyes busy with like everything around you or whatever, like going by fast. And then you just kind of, it encapsulates like your ADHD, at least for me. Some of the greatest decisions I ever made, I was in a car or on the pooper.
One other activity to help with another.
In the shower is like where men of genius are born. Well, literally, but oh, that's too bad. She's missing all the great stuff, all the pearls I'm dropping right now.
Oh, that's awesome. So thank you for tuning in, everybody.
And that was my deal on the Constitution and my opinion on it.
Oh, well, missed it. Oh, well.
Oh, well. But now that everyone's back and official can hear us, so today's episode, we pick a different topic every day, a different recovery topic. So today's topic, we're talking about developing empathy. So this is going to be I always try to think of like different things that obviously are relevant for recovery, but I know we have we've been getting a lot more viewers and other people who have been tuning in who aren't they themselves not necessarily in recovery, but have a loved one or just kind of connected someone in recovery. So wanted to kind of spend June to just, kind of, I don't necessarily say develop the show for them, but just really be able to kind of speak to some different people who are, how do I love somebody who's in recovery? And developing empathy is obviously a significant thing that we have from the book and from, various people doing other different programs. But I think that's definitely something that if I'm not in recovery, but loving someone in recovery, I know I needed a whole lot of empathy when I was still trying, especially when I was new and just starting. I needed a lot of empathy from a lot of different people to kind of help me navigate life and what things look like now in recovery. We talked about it, parenting in recovery, being an employee in recovery, just all these different things. So kind of the first question is like, what are some of the biggest things that kind of helped you, or as for your own developing empathy, relating with other people in long-term recovery? And so for those who are new to the show, I've been about Clean Time a little over about 5 years. Kirsten has 20. Is that what it is? No, I can't remember.
Sobered up when she was 13.
Yeah.
26. I did, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like decades. And then Adam, I think you just celebrated 10, right?
Yeah,
10
celebrated
continuous?
10 on the 29th of April.
Yeah, 10. Or is it? Do you call it continuous recovery?
Yeah.
I think it's weird. Like, it's probably weirder. I mean, just to talk about sober dates real quick. Like, Ricky you didn't know me back in 2000s, early 2000s or whatever.
Right.
So, but Kirsten did, and she knew. It's like, it's probably just as mind blowing to other people as it is to me that I'm 10 years sober or whatever. Because like, I came in around a time to like recovery, and maybe this could do a lot, maybe receiving empathy or whatever from other people, but like there's a lot of people who, when I came in and tried to get sober my first time, like Kirsten had been sober for a few years when I first met her. And now she's 20 years sober and I'm 10. So there's like a 10 to 12 year period there where the most time I could scramble together was like I think I got a year one time, but most of the time it was like 3 weeks, a month, and then I commit some felonies, and then I come back to my home, my recovery group, and they're just like, wow, just, welcome back, I guess.
Saw you on the news.
Yeah, saw you on the news, and saw your mugshot. But they always just like, I wouldn't even say that like in the recovery world, it's is empathy as much as it's just identification and relating, right? Like, maybe it's a form, like if you really dug into the responses to people like in recovery or whatever, you could make the argument that it's empathy, but it never felt like it was empathetic or sympathetic, or it just felt like it was just part of our day, and so it
didn't seem like pity.
Yeah, it didn't seem. Here's my thing with empathy and sympathy and stuff like that, is that it kind of creates this higher arc, like of like, I'm empathetic towards you because I'm doing good and you're not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think a lot, at least that's how I've looked at it, because usually if you're doing good and someone else in your opinion is not doing bad, but you want to be helpful to them, it's usually a couple different scenarios. One, I have to help other people to stay sober. That's what I found is like the secret sauce for me, right? And so there's motive there, right?
Okay.
And so at least when you dig down to its core, like and I think when our group kind of evolved to early on, we were just out helping as many people as we could because we didn't want to die of alcoholism, and then it kind of evolved after we'd been like sober for a while that we just wanted to be helpful. At least for me, I just wanted to be helpful. I never saw a guy coming out of detox and into the rooms and thought to myself like, that guy needs my help. It was just more like, I remember what it was like to just be a wreck, and I just want to help him because he's probably not feeling pretty good, good about himself.
Sure.
But it was never, I have a solution and I'm here to help,
Right.
And so I think, anyways, long story short, what I'm saying is that I think sometimes in the recovery world, we confuse empathy and what our role is with other people in recovery, and then just at the end of the day, just being a decent human being.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's I think at some point when you initially get sober, it's like you do how do they say it? You do steps 1, 9, and 12. Like, I'm sober, I'm sorry, and I think I'm going to go be a counselor. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to save everybody. It's true.
Yeah.
But that's what it's about. That's when it's about, I know the answer and I can sell you this potion. You know what kind of thing? It's about your ego. But there is a time in recovery where it becomes about, I literally want to just help you. I want you to, because I can see in your soul that you're so broken. And I know what that's like to sit there and be so broken and not know which direction to go. And I think, like, for the people in recovery that are early in recovery and maybe have a sponsor they don't like, or they don't have one yet, like, don't feel like you're going to hurt somebody's feelings by asking them, by getting a different sponsor. Because I've said, if this doesn't work with me, honest to God, I will help you find somebody that you click with. It's not about me. It's just about you clicking with somebody and staying here. And so it becomes less about your ego. But and I think that's exactly why, for chemically dependent people or people suffering with addiction of any kind, psychology, like therapies where you talk more about yourself, it doesn't resonate with our soul, because I'm not relating with anybody. It's like, it's like how upset I get when somebody says, "Oh, you're tired because your kid didn't sleep through the night." I totally get it. I have a dog and they were up all night, and I'm just like, enough. You know what I mean? You don't get it. So stop talking. But that's their experience with not sleeping. And so they're just trying to help. But all I hear is, if you just treated it like a dog. Well, I'm like, well, I can't kennel my kid. I'd love to. But anyway, but it's just like somebody trying to relate that's not to something that's doesn't fit. And then when we get to recovery, we hear other people talking about our exact things. And it's just like, I can't even deny this anymore, that this is probably where I belong. But, and so for loved ones, the people that love someone that is struggling, that sympathy is like Adam was saying, it's almost demeaning, like when they're like, "Oh, I feel so bad. You're such a mess," and blah, blah, blah. But the empathy is like me meeting other women in recovery, and they're like, they hear something that I thought was a sob story, and they just laugh, and they're like, "Oh my God, I did that too. His name was blah, blah, blah." You know what I mean? It's just, that is freeing. That's freeing, to relate with somebody. But like Adam was saying, I don't know if that's empathy or just relatability, but when you see somebody walk in, you can see in their eyes like, "Oh, I know the dark place that you're in right now." That makes you want to help, just to be helpful, not because of any recognition or anything.
Right.
But and it's totally okay to not have to share experience too.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have kind of, back to piggyback what Kirsten was saying, like she, shared something about with kids or something, and someone shared something about their dog. Yeah, pain is relative, like 100% it's relative. Like, I mean, I'm not third world country pain, right? And so, there's two sides to that coin, where it's like people who have to find a way to, like, make, share experience with every little experience that you're going through, and kind of almost invalidate like what you're going through, right? Like, sometimes it's okay to just hear people out and let them vent, and let them feel valued, that they're going through something and it hurts, and we're not going to minimize it by sharing an experience, right? Other times it's helpful, right? Like, you got to know who you're talking to and know where they're at. The other side of that coin is a pull yourself up by the bootstraps crowd where it's just like where they share their experience like a sword rather than it's just like I was in prison one time and I got out and I did it all by myself. I got a job, I got a place to live. I don't understand why F5 needs to exist. People just need to work harder. And I'm like, and then usually when you dig in, you're like, oh, so your family put you up on the couch when you first got out, right?
Yeah.
And then they bought you your car, and then they, and so it's I think it's just at the end of the day, like, drop the motives and just be a decent human being, and know that people are struggling, and you don't have to be this. You don't have to be the savior, and you don't have to be the you don't have to be the cop either. You know what I mean? Like, it just like you don't have to be anything.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to even have an opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did watch Adam come in and out many times. But like he was saying, you just don't shoot your wounded. And it wasn't like you'd see something like like he was saying, like you just don't shoot your wounded. And it wasn't like the equipment thievery that you're into. You know what I mean? We didn't need to do any of that. We just were like, "What's up, dude?" And then it would be like, we'd laugh at him, and then be like, "All right, get in the car, let's go." Let's just keep doing this. But there really was like this beautiful non-judgment, like, oh snap, you're gonna have stuff to deal with now, So, but just like we'll walk with you through that, and if you keep coming back, I don't care how many times you have to come back. And I don't know, Adam has some resilience that is, it's incredible. I don't know if I've known anybody that has stuck around that long waiting for it just to click. You know what I mean? But oh my gosh, kudos to that. Because
I appreciate it. That's probably the only thing that I think that I personally did right, was that no matter what, I just kept showing up. And it was like the one thing that was told to me where I still had control. Like, that's the one thing you have control of,
right?
Is you can keep showing up no matter what, right? And I honestly think that, like, my higher power was what used that experience of 10 years of just constant relapsing and constant bad decision making and constant I mean, there was times where I was humiliated. I felt humiliated, but there was a lot of times where it was humbling, right? And I had to go through the humility of, like, being honest that I relapsed again, right? Especially right after I got my 1-year cake,
Right.
Like there was. And so I think today, like, as a founder and a business owner and a nonprofit, CEO, that there's a lot of things in the background that people don't see that could be huge. Like, we're, at one point we were running out of money and didn't know how we were going to pay everybody. Another point, our rents in our offices doubled, right? Like, or we had an issue with staff that relapsed, right? Or whatever the case may be. And people, like, are freaking out. They're like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do? And this is gonna take us out." And I'm like, man, like, this feels very similar to just like, let's just continuously show up, and then if we can pay people, we'll pay them. If we can't, then we'll tell them we can't, and then we'll just keep moving forward. And I really think that those years of relapsing all the time built me to have enough scar tissue around me that it just doesn't matter what comes at us, that we can just continuously show up. And that's the best we can do some days.
And that was scary. Like, for people who didn't have that scar tissue, and it's like, okay, going home and be like, all right, I'm not going to get a paycheck. Like, that's cool. We're going to like, but this work is too important. And having that, and then being like, I don't see it. But Adam was so confident, and he was just so like, no, we're going to figure this out. Like, this work is too valuable. Like, it just almost like even if I felt a type of way, or like, no, this isn't going to work, or whatever my self-doubt was, whatever it was, having someone be so for it and so passionate about it and so just like, no, this is it. We can do this. Just like, it's almost like it just like overtook any sort of negative emotion I was having. But I was like, okay, well, if you feel that strongly, and I think a lot of it we kind of talking about with, when you leave and you relapse, you come back, and you relapse and you come back, and like all of that. Like one of the best things that I've appreciated about all the recovery groups, like nothing against treatment, nothing against some of the other different programs that I had to do, because that was valuable too. But the recovery community, or specifically in our anonymous community, that belief that keep coming, like when people say keep coming back, it works. Like when I first went, I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is just a thing we say, because, we have those repeat, the things that you just repeat at every single meeting, those phrases that we've talked about. But like, no, when people say that, like, you can see people's minds and eyes change when they say that keep coming back, it works. Especially when like I was really new and people were saying it and looking like dead in my eyes, like keep coming back, it works. Like almost like a forceful, like, we know you're going to go out there and relapse, but you keep, you know what I mean? Like they didn't say that, but like in my mind, that's how I was receiving it. And it was like, when they were saying that phrase, it was like, oh, keep coming back, it works. It was like, okay. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like whatever I thought was going to happen, you guys believe this so strongly that clearly it must mean something. And that was the type of thing that it just kept coming back. And thankfully, I didn't have any relapses, but it was like that passion, that belief to have that. So for the kind of the next question, we've talked about like in our recovery groups, that same passion that we've had. How do we help people who aren't in recovery be able to have that same sort of empathy and that same sort of connection with people, to be able to, if they don't have a story, if they've never been to jail, if they've never had a sleepless night, whatever, like how do they develop the empathy for us, for people in recovery? Like what are some things that we can share to help them?
I think everybody's experienced loss. Everybody's experienced scary times in life where they felt like they had no control. So they can relate that feeling too. But I think a beautiful part of life, or at least that I've learned, is allowing people enough room to fail, because they're what built that resilience for myself and for Adam and like built you into a determined and able businessman, and all of the stuff you didn't see how it correlated was because he had room to fail. But it was like within this cocoon of love. It was like you can be here whenever you want to be here, whatever your illness has you doing outside of here. Like we're gonna give you room for that to happen, and then come back here, and there's no judgment. And truthfully, you'll be okay. Because when you first get into recovery, you're so overwhelmed with like, yeah, but I'm this far behind child support. Yeah, but I don't have a job. Yeah, but I owe, millions of dollars or whatever Ricky owed. But all of these things that are overwhelming, and you can't see how that could possibly get fixed. And that stress, leads you back to using. But just to know, like, we don't have to deal with any of that right now. Just be here. Just keep coming back. And I promise that if you do these simple things, all of that stuff works out. Maybe not now, maybe not 10 years from now, but it all gets worked out, Right. So having room to fail is scary, but real.
Did you guys hear my coffee maker? It's like right next to my phone. Did you hear that?
No.
I was like, I kept muting because I was like making coffee, and then I unmuted because I thought I was done, and then I was like, so here's this is the others without lived experience or personal, experience of addiction, mental health, Number one, let me say it's usually undiagnosed, but it's or somebody who is high functioning, that but there are, there's lots of people out there that just don't struggle, with the same struggles that are stigmatized like the ones that we have. But it's kind of like, not to get preachy, right? But so my favorite I honestly believe that, like, um, that well, Jesus was like the greatest criminal justice reform. I heard this talk the other day about somebody posted a picture about how Jesus taking a selfie with like the disciples or whatever. And they're just like, why would you post that? Jesus would never take a selfie and this and that. And then this guy he just did this great talk where he was like, when he was like walking around doing his thing, people did not, it was the broken that had him around, and how he pushed the limits of the law and he pushed the limits of people's worldviews. And the Good Samaritan, where the priest and the Levite walked across the road and passed the guy who was on the road, who was beaten and needed help, and then his enemy, the Samaritan, helped him because he knew what it was like to be in his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so here's the thing with that is that we have a big society. Like when you get rid of the state lines, county lines, city line, all that stuff, even foreign lines, we have the society. There's a lot of views, a lot of experiences, and you can either use your experience and where you're at in life to be a burden to others, or you can use your experience or your worldviews or whatever to help other people. And we all bring gifts to the table. Some people are really good at having those one-on-one conversations, drunks and addicts and felons and felons. Like they just have that lived experience and they're able to do that. And then there's a unique set of people who I went to church one time and this guy came to me, and God bless his heart. But he sat down with me. Number one, he sat down with me. He tried, right? And he may not have had like the perfect things to say, but that wasn't important. What was important is that he just wanted to love his neighbor. And he tried. And so he said to me, he's like, Adam, I just want you to know that when I lie to my wife, I view that the same as when you steal a car and get a mugshot. Right. And I was like, number one, that's crazy.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, she's rough.
Your wife is a warden. He's like, no, he's just like, when I break it down, like, one of the issues with our society is that we categorize, that stuff or whatever. So he was able in his mind, and I don't know if he really believes that or if that's a goal he's chasing for his life or whatever, is to really view it that way. But it was super cool that someone was willing to look at the things that they've done in their life that they're not proud of as similar to the things that I'm not proud of. So it's more about the feelings and the experience and rather than the titles and the details, and categorizing those brokenness in each of us. I just think it's maybe it's just because of where I'm at and what I've learned in life or whatever, but I think it's crazy that we categorize stigma. Right? Because there's a stigma if you become a guy who's known for lying to his wife, right? Or cheating on his wife, or a pastor that has a browser history full of porn. There's stigma with that, right? But not like getting a mugshot for stealing a car or violence or stuff like that. So when you have people out there that are willing to look at it as the same and really mean it, and then take that leap of faith to just sit down and have a conversation instead of outcasting you, empathy is born in that. You can't just develop empathy. You have to practice it. Like fake it till you make it until it's kind of stirred up inside you, and then it just becomes part of you.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's interesting. Yeah. And the more people you talk to with an open mind, the more you can just see that we're all just human. There can be so many sides to people. You can be, a man of God and also like porn and you're not a bad person. You know what I mean? It's just, there are so many things. But I think there was this old idea, especially in treatment centers of years ago, you park this person in the middle of the room and just shame them until they were so broken they thought that you'd go in the right direction. But I don't know where shame has not worked as a punishment for alcoholics, for addicts, for any criminal, for children even. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make for any of that internal motivation. It just becomes self-hatred, and it just gets very destructive.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I'm not to cut you off, Kirsten. I'm not to Kanye you, but there is, so the system is built specifically for one type of people, and it's the people who can respond well to shame, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, if the recidivism results in even nationally, right, are 75%, that means, or let's say it's just, we'll round it off at 80%. If it's at 80% of people who go to prison go back to prison, that means it's working for 20%. Okay. And the problem with that 20% is that someone knows people in that 20% where it worked, and then they become pro, prison, pro accountability, pro shame, pro guilt, because they got a mugshot, they got a court case, they had to pay bail, they went to prison. They were very ashamed of it. We even see it in recovery rooms where someone got a DUI one time and they got sober and they stayed sober. Right? Like some people it works for, and that's our probably biggest competitor when it comes to to being helpful to people multiple times.
And why are those odds good enough? Is it just the money? I mean, why, if in any other realm of the world, you'd be like, well, 20% of the time, this vitamin's actually going to help you. 80% of the time, it's nothing. You know what I mean? How is that? Nobody would put up with that.
Listen.
Wait. We'll tackle that. Let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come right back to that.
We better come back to this because I have a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So if you're just tuning in, this is KRFF 95.9 LPFM. This is F5 Project, F5 Recovery Radio with One Pretty Ricky, Kirsten Huovinen, and Adam Martin. So we want to just thank Drummer's Journey for underwriting all of our programming here on 95.9. Drummer's Journey offers percussion instruments, hardware, electronics, accessories, and more. They have full service for drummers, including repair, custom building, and lessons. They're located at Highway 10 East Mall in Moorhead, Minnesota. Hours are Monday to Thursdays, 11 to 7. Fridays and Saturdays, 11 to 5. And for Adam, look at that, noon to 5. So for more info, check drummersjourney.com, and they're also on Facebook as well. So the question was, why is that? Like, why is that? Why does that happen? Why do people who are part of that 20%, who got it right the first time, or not the first time because they wouldn't have, why if they were able to get it right in the 20%, why do they have the strongest opinions? And Adam, I think you said you had an analogy, so we'll turn it right over to you.
Yeah, so number one, where we're at today is an evolution of slavery, right? Like
Right.
mass incarceration is the epitome of legalized slavery. So that was the beginning. Where we're at today is where we enterprised it to everyone, right? And obviously, African Americans or people of color are affected by that the most, but they're not the only groups that it's going through that. It's been expanded to other groups. Where we're at today, if it only works for 20% of 2 million people that are currently locked up, and 20% of them are going to not go back to prison, why do we continue to do what we're doing? One, we're so far into it that to pivot it would be impossible. Like, you can't just, it would be impossible to just release everybody from prison. We're just one day we're just like, you know what, this isn't working, release everybody, right? It would be chaos. Right?
Yeah.
And not just because there would be a lot of people, crime. Like, I'm not worried, like, if we released everyone that all of a sudden there'd probably be an uptick of crime, but it would even out. And the reason that it would even out is because once that happened and the funding was redistributed to housing and to employment and to whatever, a lot of those people would, a good 20% of them would self-correct after, pulling themselves up from their bootstraps. And then a good chunk of them, after some, relapses and maybe some criminal activity, would pivot, and eventually it would work itself out, and we could be like Norway and have a completely different prison system. But the problem is that there's inputs and outputs associated with money, with where we're at, and funding and budgets, and we're so far into it that if we abolish the prison system, not only would we release 2 million people from prison, there would be just alone in the Department of Corrections in North Dakota, that's a huge budget. We're talking up to anywhere between 250 to 500 million dollars a year to employ people. Okay, so we're talking about 900 people in corrections that would lose their job in one day. Okay, so now we just created a dependency with people we just released from prison, and then we just put 900 more people on the job hunt and welfare and whatever. And so, that's part of it. So think of it this way. If my job, so why do we accept 20%? If my job was sales, in what area where 20% success rate work? Real estate. The reason that it would work is because the money associated with each sale is a lot more versus someone who's dependent on selling something that only gets a profit of $20. Okay. And so that's why they reach out to 100 people and 20 of them return their calls and they sell houses to them. They can live on that because there's a lot of profit and there's a lot of money associated with it. If it was 20 Coca-Colas, I reached out to 100 people and I sold 20 Coca-Colas and I made $20 a day versus $20,000 a day, it wouldn't work, and we'd stop and we'd pivot. So there's too much money associated with what we're doing and how we're doing it that it will be generations before we see a complete pivot. Yep.
So do you think that will look like those jobs being like, you just change those jobs from being a CO to being like a peer support person, or you know what I mean? Put them into a different role. Is that what'll happen in the next generations, or will it just be you were released?
Yeah, I think that the pendulum is kind of finding its way to the middle. I think there's a happy medium that's starting to happen between the typical way we've done things and adding new ways to it. I think treatment centers are far behind in North Dakota than they are with the DOCR, with the Department of Corrections. There's a great understanding with the Department of Corrections that there's a next generation of not just reform, but just being helpful and changing the status quo. They're on top of it. So peer supports, different recovery centers, F5, a lot of these organizations are pivoting and employing a next generation of help in the Department of Corrections. So I do think it will look like that. My fear is that we're going to get a lot of red tape and barriers that are going to exist with it and licensing and stuff. And so one part of the reason that I don't think that probation officers or licensed addiction counselors or doctors or even nurses can be as impactful as they could be is because they have a lot of restraints on them on what they can and can't do because of codes and laws and that exist because of people with their type of lived experience serving on boards and making laws. Right. So for instance, in North Dakota, you can't, like right across the river, you can open up a treatment center and have a ton of beds available, right? And hire people and make a huge impact of having a large treatment center and creating just this huge ecosystem. In North Dakota, you can only have 16 beds per facility, per license, right? And with that, like it's almost impossible to create an ecosystem because there's just not enough money associated with 16 people. It kind of go back to the argument with selling real estate, right? In Minnesota, they don't have a cap. They can just unleash. That's why you see large treatment centers over there. In North Dakota, we have a cap, and that's why you'll never see anything really beyond outpatient, because outpatient has better numbers than you can for inpatient. Right. And so until that switches, we will never see a huge impact in North Dakota. And it will always be led by people with licenses. And anyways, the point of where I was going, and then I'll shut up. The people who developed those rules were people that are in those positions, the License Addiction Board, right? All licensed addiction counselors. You look at who's on their board, all treatment providers, right? Mm-hmm. And so if they open up that 16 to, let's say, 32, they just created a mad competition. And so right now, if they don't change that, they will continue to be on top because they were there first.
Right.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I bet you there's a bunch of treatment centers or developers or directors or legislators that will argue with me on that and say that I'm wrong. But until watch when that law changes, or if it ever changes, that code or that whatever changes, watch those people become irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's follow a dollar. Just in my career, when I started, the counties used to fund people in treatment. Anyway, slowly but surely, insurance started to dictate care. And it was just like, it felt so, I felt like my hands were tied as an addiction counselor. I just felt like there was so little I could do at that point because I couldn't keep people long enough. I knew they had to stay there longer. I knew they needed more care, but on paper they looked good enough to function. So they'd say we're done paying. You know what I mean? It's just, it felt so frustrating and so like, what's the point? What's the point of having me then if you're going to say how this goes? Mm-hmm. But anyway, but it's a beautiful shift to start to see at least societies start to entertain the idea that maybe this isn't a moral issue. You know, maybe this has more to do with an illness than like the whole, if you love your kids enough, you get sober, that whole thing, you know. Anyway.
The shift is happening, and and it's because of the opioid crisis, right? More people are dying, different kinds of people are dying, right? And so it's kind of, or you have a loved one that became an alcoholic and you're just like, it blows your mind, right? So it's just like, maybe there's something, you know, so more experiences where people are affected by others is going to create hopefully more, you know, sympathy, empathy, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I gave a talk and presentation to prosecutors and the clerk of courts and judges and the county commission of Dickey County, right? And I was very like, I mean, it was just a small kind of area. And I was like, man, I could tell this guy's he's a county commissioner. He's wearing his boots in a flannel and he's got a hat on. And in my head, I was like, I judged, right? I was like, he's probably sitting there thinking I'm just full of crap and that people just need to go to work.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's whatever. And after the meeting, he came up to me and he shared with me about someone in his life. And that he wanted to know if he could refer that person to me and take a flyer or whatever. And this is a county commissioner that I judged as not understanding. And he understands because he's affected.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it's changing.
Yeah. The sad part is that, anyway, I could get into all this, but like middle class, upper class white kids started dying. And then it became important, which follow the money. You know?
Anyway. You know what's cool about the county commissioners that I met with yesterday from Dickey County? They all knew who I was, not necessarily because of, you know, the work that I mean, they know about it, but because I won the primary in Cass County.
No kidding.
Yeah. So that was part of the reason of them showing up is because they had, you know, they knew a little bit more about me. And so when I mentioned yesterday, I was like, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I ran in Cass County in one primary, and they applauded me.
Yeah.
the county
Yes,
commissioners.
amen.
And it was like, and so I think, even in little, not little, but less populated counties, they're affected by these crises, and a lot of times their hands are tied and they don't know what to do. So then some guy who comes and wins some primary and then backs out and starts a treatment center caught their attention.
Yeah, I'm kidding. Yeah, they want change. They want the real change, not the talk. But, yeah.
Yeah, Laura,
Dinky County. Good. I like that name.
and I like that Laura had made a comment. She was just talking about like when we were talking about the officers and people in corrections who would no longer have jobs. She would say it should just be a shift. It should be a shift to help rehabilitate those inmates like they should have been doing in the first place. And I think a lot of that, looking at from the financial perspective or whatever perspective you want to look at it, from an empathy perspective, it should be rehabilitation. It should be connection. It should be coming from a place like you should be able to empathize with a person without having like that Dickey County commissioner that you're talking about, like, and ideally in the best possible case, he would be able to understand where you're coming from, understanding and knowing, okay, we need to put money, we need to do all the things without having to be affected. But because he was affected, then he was like, okay, I want to make help. I want to make change. I want to do all these different things. And so like, and it's difficult because sometimes it's like, man, I wish people would have more, not that you want more people in recovery, but it's just like, I wish there would just be more people who are just open about it. And I would be able to say, hey, I know somebody who's in recovery. I have been affected, because I think if you've been affected, then it's a lot easier to develop that empathy because you have lived experience with it. Even if it's not you directly, even if it's, not that person, even if it's, I'm not myself, but I love someone who is. That it just starts the process of empathy to be able to make that connection, to be able to say, hey, I want to see some change. And hopefully it would start from the places of the licensing boards that you were talking about, of the politicians and legislators, anyone in a position of power, being able to say, hey, I'm willing to look at this from a different perspective, rather than be like, I know in the back of my mind that when I make this policy change, when I do this thing, it's going to affect, I'm thinking of a specific person that this is going to affect, or this is a person that's going to hurt. Instead of doing anything about it, I'm going to just, they'll be all right. They'll figure it out. And then just go this other different direction, because I think that's way more harmful than ever. Like, recognize that, acknowledge it, and do something different, do something better. Right. Yeah. That's the hope.
And Laura she's got so much lived experience. If we can just use the people that have the experience, anyway, she's going to be a big deal, because, she's walked all of it. That's for sure.
Laura has been like supporting this like podcast, this, at least Facebook Live, from the beginning. And I believe she's a subscriber to this or whatever. So I think that you should reach out to her, Kirsten, and see if we can set up a time and have her on the show.
Yeah, she has an amazing story and has a great attitude about it, and just has never ever given up.
I hope she's watching. She heard that. So it's every comment that I've seen her has always been encouraging. She's shared experience, and so I think it's probably time. And we should randomly do this throughout the time, where we're going to randomly pick people. So Laura, just know that on one of these shows in the next couple of weeks, if you're watching, we're just gonna invite you right in.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So last thing or whatever, and then I know Ricky, you like to do your final question thing or whatever. With the changes that are happening, the way that it's happening is a lot of the jails and corrections, they're all funded through the federal government and taxes, right? And so most of the people that we have serving in our legislature or county commission or whatever, very money minded, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in North Dakota. And they get really apprehensive of like changing the way we do things. But when you, so for instance, let's just say hypothetically, Ricky just got out of prison. How much money do we just spend on him? Right. And usually it only talks about, when that conversation happened, it only talks about the cost of prison. It costs just as much as a degree to lock someone up in prison, or whatever. We should focus on college. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a crappy answer because it's,
Yeah.
that's whatever. But, what it misses is from the damage that was created to the family, right? The kids that are now in the system, maybe foster care or maybe mom's on welfare because they developed, an addiction or drinking or whatever. And then the engagement from police. So now we got law enforcement involved and they have to spend time with this person and book them into jail. Now we got, the deputies in jail and now they're locked up in jail waiting to go to court. The clerk of courts, their assistants, the prosecutor, the public defender, the judge, right? So if you go from the beginning of the river to the time that they re-enter society, I honestly believe that every dollar spent in changing the way that we do things is going to save $77. So every dollar will save $77 on that river in the future. So even if it works for of 100 people, 20% of those people, right? If we get to have the same guidelines as that we do for corrections, where it only works for 20 to 30%, on our side, it only works for 20 to 30%, we will save vastly much more money for every dollar spent if we save $77 than they will if they continue to do what they're doing. So that's a really good conversation to have with like county commissioners and stuff, because they want to make a change, they want to get sober, but there's a lot of fear of wasting money or whatever because there's such a stigma around relapse.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, with our last few seconds, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is F5 Recovery Radio. Kirsten Huovinen, Adam Martin, thank y'all. Appreciate you. Love y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you again really, really soon. Thank you so, so much, everyone. Talk to you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.